Two different buyers paid Andrea Doherty for the exact same Porsche. There was only one car. That was the whole game at CPR Classic, her late father's restoration shop in Fallbrook, where Andrea would sell a customer's consigned car, keep the cash, then quietly sell it again. She ran versions of that on 66 people and walked off with more than $827,000. Walked off, at least, until the wire fraud charges landed. 21 months in prison, $9.5 million in restitution, and her dad's good name burned to the ground. Andrea Nicole Doherty is 38, out of Fallbrook, California, up in the hills north of San Diego. Her father built CPR Classic into a shop with a real reputation in the classic Porsche world. It restored the old air-cooled ones, the cars people baby like children, and it did the work well enough that the name on the door meant something. Then in 2021, her father died, and Andrea took over. She inherited a good business, a real client list, a reputation her father had spent years earning, and a name people already trusted. That trust was the most valuable thing in the building, worth more than any single car on the lot. And now it was hers. Now, a shop like that does two things. It fixes cars and it sells them. A good chunk of the selling runs on consignment, and consignment is where this whole story lives. It works like this. You own a Porsche you want to sell. You don't want the hassle of listing it, screening buyers, babysitting the money, so you hand it to a shop with a good name. They find a buyer, they take their cut, they pass you the rest. The car stays yours right up until the day it sells. The shop is just the middleman you trust to be straight with your money. And these are not cheap cars. A stored air-cooled Porsche can run well past $100,000. The people consigning them are collectors, enthusiasts, retirees, finally cashing in a car they'd babied for decades. When they hand it over, they're handing a shop one of the most valuable things they own, and trusting it to sell the thing honestly. That trust is the entire product. You are giving a stranger your car and betting they'll pay you when it sells. At a shop with Andrea's father's name over the door. That felt like the safest bet in the world. The safe bet was the flaw. Because the one person who knew whether a car had really sold, and for how much, and whether the owner ever got paid, was Andrea. The owner isn't standing in the showroom watching. The buyer has never met the owner. The only thread connecting those two people ran straight through her. Cut that thread, and you can tell each side whatever keeps them calm. So Andrea sold cars that weren't hers to sell and kept the money. Prosecutors laid out the mechanics. A customer consigns a Porsche. Andrea sells it. Then she doesn't call the owner, and she doesn't hand over a dime. As far as the owner knows, the car is still on the lot waiting for the right buyer. As far as the buyer knows, they just bought a car from a shop with a spotless name. Only Andrea knew both halves didn't add up.
Ladies and gentlemen,
on one deal, prosecutors say she took $280,000 from a buyer and never paid the man who owned the car. On another, she sold a consigned Porsche for $130,000, and the owner never saw a cent. Never even got told it was gone. And she had a bolder version. One Porsche, one set of keys, two people writing checks for it. Both believe they own it. Only one of them can. That math never works, and Andrea ran it anyway. A restored Classic isn't a car you drive off the lot that same afternoon either. There's final work, there's shipping, there's paperwork crawling between states. That built-in delay is exactly the room a scheme like this needs. A buyer who's been told his car is getting its last detailing, or is sitting on a truck headed his way, will wait weeks before he starts to worry, which, I guess, was the whole point. The trouble with taking a man's money for a car he never gets is that he calls. He shows up. He asks where his Porsche is, so Andrea needed a way to keep the earlier victims quiet while she lined up new ones. So it became a Ponzi. Prosecutors used that exact word. When an angry owner or a stiffed buyer finally came asking for their money, Andrea paid them. not out of profit, because there wasn't any real profit. She paid them with the next buyer's cash. Fresh money in the door covered the last person she'd cheated. Rob one Porsche customer, pay off the one before him, then go hunt down the next. That buys you time. The hole underneath only gets deeper though, because every person she made whole got made whole with someone new she now owed. I don't know what Andrea thought the endgame was, because a Ponzi doesn't have one. It just runs until the new money stops showing up. She ran it on 66 people, 66 owners and buyers scattered across the country, every one of them dealing with a shop they had no reason to doubt. And those two headline numbers aren't measuring the same thing. The $827,000 is the slice tied to the specific wire fraud counts she pleaded to, her personal take on the transactions the government pinned down cold. The $9.5 million is the whole crater, what prosecutors put on the total damage across all 66 victims. The gap between them is the Ponzi doing its work. Money pouring in one door and straight back out the other to keep the earlier victims from ever calling the police. For a while, the paying off kept the noise down. One unhappy customer at a time is manageable. You apologize, you cut a check with someone else's money, you buy yourself a few more months. What you can't manage is when they start finding each other. These were Porsche people. It's a small world. A lot of them know each other, and they talk. An owner who never got paid starts asking around. A buyer waiting on a car that never arrives starts asking around. And the separate complaints slowly line up into one shape, and that shape has Andrea's name all over it. One complaint is a misunderstanding, two is a coincidence, but 66 is a pattern. And once it looked like a pattern, this stopped being a business dispute and turned into a federal case. If you're enjoying this one, hit subscribe. I dig up a new one of these every week. And they weren't all local. A shop with a name like CPR Classic lists cars online, ships them across the country, closes deals with people it never meets in person. So Andrea could take a check from a buyer 2,000 miles away who was never going to drive past the lot and spot his car sitting there with someone else's paperwork on it. The distance did half the work for her. Picture the guy on the other end of one of these deals. He wired $280,000 for a Porsche, or he handed over a car he'd owned for 20 years, and now he's home waiting on a call that never comes. He did everything right. He picked a shop with a spotless name and years of good reputation behind it. That was his whole mistake, and it was a reasonable one to make. For a collector, that car might have been years of saving. For a retiree, it might have been the whole plan, sell the Porsche and live on what it brought in. Instead, they got a police report to file and a lawyer to hire, and the shop they trusted turned out to be the trap. By 2024, the lawsuits were stacking up, around 50 civil cases, some filed against her by the end of that year. 50 separate people who'd handed a car or a check to CPR Classic and gotten neither back, all in court trying to pry it loose. 50 lawsuits isn't a bad quarter, it's a collapse. And every complaint filed turned the paper Andrea had been hiding behind into evidence against her. Then the state stepped in. In September of 2024, the California DMV suspended her dealer license. No license, no legal way to sell a car, and the business went dark. The shop her father spent a career building shut its doors, buried under a pile of lawsuits. The federal government was already circling. 50 civil suits and a suspended dealer license leave the kind of paper trail a prosecutor can follow with his eyes closed. When Andrea learned there was an investigation, she cooperated with it, which, I'll be honest, is more than a lot of people in her seat ever manage. It didn't save her. It just meant she stopped pretending. In December of 2025, Andrea pleaded guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud. She admitted the whole machine. The consignments she never paid out, the cars she sold out from under their owners, the money she shuffled around to cover the gaps. Sentencing came on July 24th of 2026. 21 months in federal prison and a restitution order for $9,951,000 owed to 66 victims across the country. The U.S. Attorney's Office didn't dress it up. They said she took her customers for a ride and that justice had brought the trip to an end, which is about as much of a pun as a federal prosecutor ever lets himself get away with. 21 months set against that whole crater of a restitution bill. And restitution is just a court order. It says what she owes. Whether those 66 people ever see the money is a different question. If you ask me, that's the part that should sting. Somebody who lost a $100,000 Porsche in this walks away with a judgment on paper and a spot at the back of a very long line. It all traces back to that one car, one Porsche, sold to two people who both believed a shop with a good name would do right by them. Andrea's father spent years making CPR Classic mean your car was safe there. Andrea spent about 2 years making it mean the exact opposite, and it cost 66 people millions of dollars to find out. She inherited a good name and a working business. She could have just run it. That's the part I don't get. Instead, she sold the same car twice and got caught. The prison term runs under 2 years. The name over that door doesn't come back. More stories like this on the channel.